Hey, I'm Noggs, and this is Noggs House. Today we're going to talk about one of the biggest changes in all of human history, the agricultural revolution. So get ready, because this one is going to change how you think about something you probably do every single day, eating. Let's start by talking about what life was like before the agricultural revolution. Imagine waking up every single day with no food in your house, no fridge, no pantry, nothing. To eat, you have to go find your food. That was life for most of human history. People lived in small groups and moved around all the time, following animals they hunted and searching for wild plants and berries they could eat. We call these people hunter-gatherers. Hunter because they hunted animals, and gatherers because they gathered plants. Pretty simple name, right? These groups were always on the move. You couldn't stay in one place too long because you'd run out of food nearby and have to go find more. But then about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, something amazing started to happen. People figured out that if you took a seed and put it in the ground, water it, and take care of it, it grows into food you can eat. And here's the really smart part. You could do that again and again in the same spot every single season. This was the beginning of farming, and it changed everything. Scientists called this period the agricultural revolution. Revolution means a huge sweeping change, not something that happens overnight, but a shift so big that everything is different afterwards. It happened in lots of different places around the world, kind of independently. In a region called the Fertile Crescent, that's the area around modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, people started growing wheat and barley around 9,500 years before the year zero. That's really, really old, like way before ancient Egypt old. At around the same time, people in that same area started growing other plants like peas, lentils, and chickpeas. And figs might actually be one of the oldest plants humans ever farmed, possibly even older than wheat. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world in East Asia, people were figuring out how to grow rice and millet. In China, rice farming goes back to 6,200 BCE. And in the Americas, people were growing squash around 10,000 years ago. So farming wasn't invented in just one place. People all over the world were making this discovery at similar times. How cool is that? Now, plants were only part of the story. Around the same time people started farming crops, they also started doing something called domesticating animals. Domestication means taking a wild animal and, over many generations, raising and breeding them so they become tame and useful to people. Think about a dog. Dogs come from wolves. Wolves are wild animals. But over thousands of years, humans and wolves started helping each other out, and eventually wolves became the friendly dogs we have today. That's domestication. Early farmers did the same thing with pigs, cows, goats, and sheep. These animals were incredibly helpful. They gave people meat and milk for food. Sheep gave wool for clothing, and some animals could carry heavy things or help pull loads. Before, if you wanted meat, you had to go hunt a wild animal. And maybe you'd catch one, maybe you wouldn't. With domesticated animals, your food supply was right there with you every single day, way more reliable. So now people had farms growing crops and animals living nearby. That meant food was much more steady and predictable. And when your food is steady and predictable, you don't have to move around anymore. This led to one of the biggest changes of all. People stopped being nomads. Nomad means someone who moves around and has no permanent home, and started building permanent homes in villages. Why travel around chasing animals when you've got crops in the ground you need to water and tend to, and animals you need to feed? You stay put. Early settlements, the first villages, starting popping up. Places like Katul Huyuk in modern-day Turkey were some of the earliest permanent communities humans ever built. People were putting down roots, literally and figuratively. And once you have a home, a field full of crops, and a pen full of animals, you've got something totally new in human history. You've got stuff. Your own stuff. Stuff that belongs to you. Before farming, everything was on the move. You carried what you could, and there wasn't much point in owning a lot. And most things were communal, which means that they were shared among many people. But once you've spent months plowing a field, planting seeds, watering them, pulling weeds, and waiting for harvest, that field matters to you. You worked hard for it. You needed it to survive. And if someone came along and tried to take it, you'd want to protect it. This is how the idea of property was born. Property just means that things that belong to you. Land, animals, food you've stored away, or anything else that you own. Farming created a whole new kind of wealth. Fields you could point to and say, that's mine. Animals in a pen with your name on them. Bags of grain stored up for winter. And thinkers throughout history have tried to explain why this makes sense. One philosopher named Jim Locke had a famous idea. He said that when you put your labor, your hard work into something, it becomes yours. If you clear a field, you dig it up, plant it, and grow food from it, you mix your work into that land, so you own it. Makes sense, right? Another thinker named Harold Demsetz said, Property rights, basically rules about who owns what, show up naturally when having those rules helps people more than it costs them. With farming, clear rules about who owned which field stopped a lot of fights, so the rules were worth having. Now, farming didn't just change where people lived and what they owned, it changed how people lived together too. When you have a lot of food coming in, more than your family can eat, that's called a surplus. A surplus is extra. Surplus food is huge, and here's why. Before farming, everyone had to help find food, pretty much all the time. If you weren't hunting or gathering, you weren't eating. But with farming surpluses, not everyone had to grow food anymore. Some people could do other things. One person could become a tool maker, another could become a builder. Someone else could become a trader. This is called division of labor. Different people doing different jobs. And the more jobs there are, the more complex and organized the community gets. Bigger communities needed leaders to make decisions. They needed rules to keep things fair. They needed ways to keep track of who owned what and who owed what to who. That's basically the beginning of government and laws. And all of this started because someone, thousands of years ago, pushed a seed into the dirt and waited to see what happened. Now, farming wasn't perfect. Early farmers actually worked more hours than hunter-gatherers did. And because farmers ate mostly the same crops over and over, their diets were less varied than people who ate all kinds of wild plants and animals. Some early farmers were actually less healthy in some ways. Farming also changed the land itself. Forests were cleared to make fields, rivers were rerouted for irrigation. That means bringing water to crops through channels and ditches. Humans were reshaping the natural world in a big way for the first time. But despite all that, farming won out. It could feed way more people from the same amount of land, and that's why human populations started growing. More food meant bigger families meant bigger villages, and bigger villages meant more people doing more different jobs. And all of that set the stage for the next giant leap in human history. Humans started farming, planting crops, and raising animals instead of hunting and gathering. This happened all over the world at around the same time, from the Middle East to Asia to the Americas. Farming meant people could stay in one place, which led to permanent villages and settlements. Owning land and animals that you worked hard for gave birth to the idea of property. Surplus food meant not everyone had to farm, which led to different jobs, social classes, and eventually government and laws. Pretty wild how much changed just because someone planted a seed, right? Thanks for hanging out with me today at Nog's house. But our story is far from over. Next time we're going to talk about what happened when those little villages grew and grew until they became something brand new in human history. The first cities. We're talking thousands of people living together. The first writing systems and the very beginnings of civilization as we know it. I hope you'll come back for that. See you next time.